Life 4.5 million years ago existed in a world both brutal and beautiful, where survival was a constant challenge and every day demanded resilience, intelligence, and adaptability. The landscape was dominated by sprawling savannas, scattered woodlands, and meandering rivers that carved paths through the land, providing water and life to all who depended on it. Towering trees offered shelter, shade, and fruits, while open grasslands were home to herds of antelope-like creatures, cautious of the predators that prowled their boundaries. The climate fluctuated, with alternating dry and wet seasons shaping the rhythms of life. It was a time before the rise of civilizations, before tools became instruments of industry, but it was also a time that witnessed the extraordinary emergence of the first humans, creatures who would come to define the very concept of survival, Homo habilis. Homo habilis lived in a precarious balance, constantly negotiating the dangers and opportunities presented by their environment. Their bodies were adapted to life both on the ground and among the trees. With long arms, dexterous hands, and relatively small bodies, they were agile enough to climb when threatened, yet capable of walking upright across open terrain. Their brains, larger than those of their Australopithecine predecessors, allowed them to observe, anticipate, and strategize in ways that gave them a distinct edge over other animals sharing their ecosystem. Every aspect of their existence, from finding food to avoiding predators, demanded the application of their growing cognitive abilities. Survival was not guaranteed, it was earned through intelligence, cooperation, and adaptability. Food acquisition was the cornerstone of Homo habilis' existence. They were omnivorous, scavenging the remains of carcasses left by larger predators, while also foraging for fruits, tubers, seeds, and nuts. Their keen observational skills allowed them to identify which plants were edible and which were toxic, and their dexterous hands enabled them to dig roots or peel fruit with remarkable precision. The discovery and use of simple stone tools revolutionized their ability to access food. Sharp-edged stones could strip flesh from bone, crack nuts, or scrape bark for nutrition, turning their environment into a resource they could manipulate. These early implements were crude by modern standards, yet they represented a fundamental leap in survival capability, a tangible extension of the mind into the material world. The social structures of Homo habilis were fluid but essential to their survival. Living in small, loosely connected groups provided protection, support, and the transmission of knowledge. Individuals learned from each other through observation, imitation, and instruction, passing down essential skills like tool use, foraging techniques, and strategies for avoiding predators. Cooperation extended to sharing food, caring for the weak or injured, and collectively defending against threats. Even in a world dominated by risk, the bonds formed within these groups created opportunities for success that solitary individuals could rarely achieve. Social cohesion became an adaptive strategy, a silent agreement that survival required more than strength. It required intelligence applied to the collective. Predation was a constant threat, and Homo habilis existed in a landscape teeming with danger. Leopards, hyenas, and other large carnivores prowled the savannas, while snakes and birds of prey threatened the young and inexperienced. Every step taken in search of food or water was a negotiation with mortality. Homo habilis relied on vigilance, understanding the habits of predators, and learning to interpret environmental cues, the rustle of leaves, the smell of decay, the tracks in the mud. Their ability to read the land was a matter of life and death. When necessary, they sought refuge in trees, rock shelters, or thickets, using their knowledge of terrain to avoid confrontation. This constant interaction with danger sharpened their cognitive and sensory abilities, forging a mind capable of rapid decision-making under pressure. Water, the lifeblood of survival, defined the movement and patterns of Homo habilis. Rivers and streams were not only sources of hydration, but also hubs of ecological activity. Animals congregated near water, vegetation thrived, and clay or mud provided materials for primitive shelters or protective coatings. Homo habilis understood the value of these waterways, timing their foraging and hunting to coincide with availability, while remaining aware of the risks posed by lurking predators. Water sources became social centers, gathering places for communication, cooperation, and observation. The ability to navigate, remember, and return to these critical locations demonstrated an emerging sense of spatial awareness and environmental mastery. Reproduction and raising offspring were equally intertwined with survival strategies. Homo habilis faced high infant mortality due to predators, disease, and environmental hazards. Successful parenting required constant attention, protection, and teaching. Children were gradually introduced to foraging, tool use, and recognition of threats, learning to balance curiosity with caution. Survival was a shared responsibility. Knowledge was not instinctive but acquired through experience, demonstration, and imitation. In this way, each generation built upon the lessons of the previous one, creating a continuum of survival strategies that extended beyond individual lifetimes. Cognitive development was perhaps the defining characteristic of Homo habilis. Their larger brains enabled problem-solving, planning, and memory in ways that reshaped their interaction with the world. They experimented with new tools, testing shapes and materials for effectiveness. They learned to recognize patterns in animal behavior, seasonal changes, and resource availability. This foresight allowed them to prepare for scarcity, store food, or relocate in response to shifting conditions. Their thought processes were grounded in survival, yet capable of abstraction, understanding cause and effect, manipulating their environment, and anticipating consequences. Intelligence became as vital a tool as any stone implement, guiding behavior and enhancing resilience. The interplay between environment and innovation defined the evolutionary path of Homo habilis. Their survival strategies were not static, they evolved in response to shifting landscapes, climate change, and competition. Periods of drought demanded new approaches to food and water procurement. Expansion of grasslands required adaptation to open spaces, including enhanced vigilance and cooperative defense. The presence of larger, more aggressive predators forced innovations in mobility, shelter, and tool use. In each case, Homo habilis responded with creativity, demonstrating an unprecedented flexibility in behavior and cognition. Adaptability became their hallmark, allowing them to occupy niches that other species could not exploit. Fire, though not fully mastered by Homo habilis, was beginning to shape their interactions with the environment. Observations of natural fires, whether from lightning strikes or volcanic activity, may have inspired methods for using heat to process food, preserve materials, or maintain warmth. Even the earliest engagement with fire required careful observation and experimentation, reinforcing the capacity for planning, patience, and risk assessment. Fire symbolized the potential to manipulate natural forces, to bend the environment to human needs, and to extend the influence of intelligence beyond the immediate body. Communication within Homo habilis groups was evolving in complexity. Vocalizations, gestures, and perhaps rudimentary symbolic expressions allowed the coordination of hunting, alerting of danger, and transmission of knowledge. These communication systems were critical for cooperative survival, enabling individuals to share observations about predators, food sources, and environmental hazards. Language, in its earliest forms, was a bridge between cognition and action, facilitating collaboration, learning, and the establishment of social norms. Through communication, Homo habilis could transmit strategies that no single individual could invent alone, creating a collective culture of intelligence. The legacy of Homo habilis is evident in the way they interacted with their world. Every action, from the selection of a stone to the observation of an animal, reflected a growing understanding of cause, effect, and consequence. Their lives were shaped not only by immediate needs, but by the ability to anticipate, experiment, and innovate. They transformed their environment in subtle yet profound ways, leaving traces in tools, footprints, and the distribution of remains that continue to inform modern understanding of human evolution. Each discovery offers a window into a mind learning to master the art of survival in an unforgiving world. Social identity and cooperation were intertwined with survival strategies. Homo habilis exhibited behaviors that reinforced group cohesion and strengthened bonds between individuals. Sharing food, collectively defending against predators, and teaching younger members were not mere conveniences, they were critical adaptations. Social intelligence became as vital as physical strength or agility. Understanding the dynamics of relationships, trust, and collaboration provided advantages that individual skill alone could not achieve. In essence, Homo habilis survived not just as individuals, but as members of interdependent networks of care, learning, and mutual support. The interaction between Homo habilis and the broader ecosystem was dynamic and reciprocal. They influenced prey populations, modified landscapes through foraging, and shaped the distribution of resources through repeated use of certain sites. At the same time, the pressures of predators, climate, and competition constrained their strategies and honed their innovations. This constant feedback loop created a selective environment where intelligence, adaptability, and social cooperation became critical.